Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about Boris Johnson, about the vote of no confidence last Monday, about where that leaves him, where that leaves us, and what are the possibilities, what might happen from now. Before I do that, if you haven't already subscribed, I really would appreciate it if you wouldn't mind doing so, and if you approve of what I say, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, I'd appreciate that too. So last Monday, as we all know, 148 MPs voted for the removal of Boris Johnson. Wasn't enough. 211 voted to support him. And this was a huge moment because it meant that Boris Johnson went from being incredibly powerful, probably one of the most powerful Prime Ministers ever, who could do absolutely anything. He could bring in any legislation, he could push anything through because he had a cabinet of complete weaklings and non-entities, and all he had to do was to keep his backbenchers quiet and happy, and he could do whatever he liked. He was king of the world. He went from that in a space of a day to being a lame duck, to being somebody who can't possibly last very long, because he's now in such a weak position. And it was all because of Partygate, all because of, as I mentioned last week, it's this total loss of trust in a man who has behaved in a way which most people strongly disapprove of. In other words, whilst everybody else was in lockdown, I don't need to go through it all, but everybody else was in lockdown, he was having a good time, and on top of all that, he tried to get out of it so disgracefully by making rather pathetic excuses, and I think many people are suspicious about why the police and why Sue Gray and so on reported the way they did. So anyway, he's now very weak, and it's a question of what happens next, because he, as you will have seen, immediately after the result of the vote, and he started talking about we've got to put it behind us and get on, move on, and all the rest of it. And you probably saw him at the cabinet meeting the next day saying about how we've got to get on with this, get on with that. But really, it's all hollow now, because everybody knows he's very, very limited in what he can do. He can't push through controversial legislation anymore because there are too many people who might cause trouble. He probably also knows that it's extremely likely that there are people plotting behind his back to find ways of unseating him. Might even involve ministers, who knows, because there are several people in the cabinet who fancy his job. So he's in a terrible position. And there are various things that might happen in the next few months, because I've been saying for 9 months, I think, that I didn't think he'd last. I didn't think he was suitable because he's dishonest, he's lazy and incompetent, and because he's self-obsessed. And I thought all those faults would disqualify anybody normally from leadership. He has fantastic charm and all the chutzpah and the charisma and all the rest of it, which gets him through. I think, actually, talking about him for a moment, he's not what you would call really very intellectual. In as much as somebody who's intellectual, somebody who can sort of kind of form opinions about, form conclusions about complicated sets of circumstances and so on. And I think that's borne out by, you see, for example, just before he became Prime Minister back in July in 2019, he went to Dominic Cummings' house and asked Dominic Cummings to come and to Number 10 to be his advisor. Cummings gave him a list of conditions on which he would agree to do so. But he really needed Cummings because he doesn't have the intellectual depth that Cummings has. Cummings can look at all sorts of scenarios and all sorts of very complicated issues and come to sensible, wise conditions. I don't think Johnson's that type of brain. I think his brain is one of just bluster and PR and push on through and winging it and just getting away with it all the time. And I think anybody with a deeper intellect would not do things like, for example, with the Northern Ireland Protocol, the way he was saying there will be no borders, there will be no borders. Anyone with an intellect would have said, well, look, if I'm saying this, but I know there has to be a border. Why am I saying this? Because I know I'm going to negotiate a deal fairly soon. I'm going to be signing a deal fairly soon, which will include a border. And then what am I going to do about it? And things like when the parties were being held, I mean, he knew the parties were going on. The fact that he didn't stop and think and say, well, what will be the consequences if people find out about these parties? I'm taking a risk here. It's an unnecessary risk. Stop them, because he just can't. He can't think forward. And I mean, I think that's got him into a lot of trouble. Is that another example? And that the idea of going off, dumping his security people, and going off to that weekend in Italy with Lebedev. I mean, that was extremely foolish. Did he not think, well, what happens if this gets out? It's not going to look very good. And so I don't think he has that sort of cleverness. And I think he, once his wife sacked Cummings, then I think he was probably, I don't know who's advising now, probably she advises as much as anything, but he's somebody who is not that smart when it comes to planning and so on. He's very much somebody who likes being Prime Minister but doesn't want to do the work that Prime Ministers have to do. Hence all the, as I mentioned several times before, the high-vis journeys and all the rest of it, 5 high-vis visits to all sorts of different places. He's never really on the job studying the detail. So when it comes to what's going to happen, a lot of people think the by-elections, the upcoming by-elections, will be significant. I don't think anybody should take any store on them at all. I think they're what is known as priced in. I think everybody knows that Wakefield is going to be lost by a very substantial majority to the Conservatives. Tiverton and Honiton, almost certainly, it seems extremely likely that's going to be lost as well, despite the fact that the Tories now have a 23,000 majority, but it seems very likely that will be lost as well. But I think people are more or less expecting it. So I don't think, however bad the by-election results are, I don't think that'll make a great deal of difference. The next thing, of course, in the autumn, there's going to be this Parliamentary Standards Committee investigation and subsequent report as to whether or not he misled Parliament. Whatever they find, you can bet your bottom dollar he will say that when he misinformed Parliament, he thought he was telling the truth. He didn't realise he was misinforming them. He'll find some way of wriggling out of that. And so I don't think he's going to be tripped up with either of those two. But I think it's quite possible something else will crop up where he'll make a mess of things in another way, which might well trip him up. I think the big danger for him is that one of his cabinet members might resign. You see, he's in such a weak position now that if any cabinet member was to resign, and maybe a few others start following on, I mean, he's finished then. And if anyone in the cabinet were to resign, they'd immediately be plotting, almost certainly be plotting to bring him down. So that's I think his biggest weakness. He's got to keep everybody on side, and he's got to be doing favours for them now instead of them just going along with anything he's wanted to do. And that's a position he will absolutely hate. And I would guess, not that one would have 1 ounce of sympathy for that man ever for the damage he's done to this country, but I would guess he's very, very unhappy indeed, because he knows his situation is impossible. It's unsustainable. And the bluster just simply ain't going to do it anymore. So it's then a question if he does go, or when he does go, and I'm pretty sure he's going to go pretty soon. My own guess is, as I say, I've been saying for a long time he wasn't going to last, but I simply thought he's so reckless that he'd do something stupid which would trip himself up, but that hasn't happened. But once he does go, it's then a question of who's going to replace him. And of course, one of the arguments has been for some time that people haven't moved against him because who would they replace him with? Because there doesn't seem to be anybody suitable. And when considering who's going to replace him, you've got to bear in mind that it'll be the Tory backbenchers who will choose the 2 front runners, and they'll be then put to the party throughout the country, and the party throughout the country. If you're a paid-up member of the Conservative Party, chances are you're pretty right-wing and so on. So you have to bear that in mind when considering who might succeed Johnson as and when he goes. I had a look earlier at the betting odds, because it's always a very good indication as to who really is favourite when you start looking at what the bookmakers are offering. Favourite at the moment is Jeremy Hunt, unsurprisingly, and I can't help thinking. I know people. If I say anything positive about him, people will immediately be jumping in the comments saying he wrecked the health service and so on. whatever that situation, I'm not qualified to comment on how good or bad a health secretary was, but he does seem to be somebody who is, he seems to be a very honest and decent sort of guy. I mean, I mean, particularly compared with what we got now. But I would have thought he'd be a safe pair of hands, and I'd thought he would be by far the best person to take over from Johnson. Second in the list, I have the list here. Second, and this is absolutely amazing, is Penny Mordaunt. She's the Trade Minister of Trade Policy or something or other. And I mean, I don't know, does anybody know who she is? I mean, she's extremely unknown, I would have thought. To say she's second favourite, not that far behind Jeremy Hunt, as it happens. She's a little bit popular at the moment because she's gone off to America and done a couple of trade deals with individual states. Now, you remember last September Johnson went off to Washington to meet Biden in order to start talking about trade and so on. And it was always clear that Brexit had no way of, I mean, Brexit was always going to be a disaster anyway, but there's only possible benefit from Brexit could have been that if we got a big deal with America, we absolutely needed it because there's nowhere else we're going to get these big trade deals. And obviously Biden said to Johnson, forget it, you know, you go away sunny and sort out Northern Ireland and come back and maybe a few years' time we'll think about it. And I mean, that was the point at which I reckon that Johnson realised the game was up, that you know, he was never going to succeed with Brexit. Anyway, Penny Mordaunt's going over and she's dealing with individual states. She got a deal, apparently. I don't know what sort of deal it is, and I don't know what sort of deal individual states can make with us, but she got a deal with Indiana, population 6 million, of some sort of deal. Now she's got a few brownie points for that, and she ends up second favourite to be the new Prime Minister. I mean, you can't really believe this. Third is Truss. This is a woman who speaks like Alexa on a bad day. I mean, just the thought is just beyond belief. Fourth favourite is Tom Tugendhat. I would have thought he would also be quite a safe pair of hands, though inexperienced. I don't think he's been a minister, and I'm not sure whether or not the Tory party are going to vote for him. May do. I think probably the Tory party in general would vote for Patel, but after that it's then Sunak, Wallace and Zahawi. There's been a lot of talk about Ben Wallace lately. I mean, he's kept a low profile and seems quite a solid sort of guy. The only thing against him is that he's extremely close to Boris Johnson. I think he's about the nearest that Boris Johnson's got to having a friend, and so we'd probably get more of the same. The worry is, I mean, there's a lot of euphoria about the possibility of Johnson going last week. People are very excited about it, but quite frankly, with the Tory backbenchers and then the party at large choosing his successor, we're likely to get more of the same, which is not going to be great. And so it's all a bit of a mess, really. But it doesn't. It's not a good thing to have a split party as the government, and to have such a weak prime minister is not a good thing. And as I've said before, the whole world has seen the booing, and the whole world knows that Johnson is a laughingstock and very unpopular, and that's not good. It's not going to change. You know, when you become that unpopular, especially so suddenly, people are not going to suddenly say, we've forgiven him, we're forgetting all about the fact that he's a cheat and he's dishonest and he's not a very nice guy. That's the perception now, and that will remain. There's no way back for Johnson now. Absolutely no. It's a question of when he goes, not if. So anyway, that's what I think about it, and I will just have to see. Now, over the last few weeks, I've read a few comments from people to the previous videos. Many people, hundreds, have said that they quite enjoy this and find it quite amusing. A few people, just a handful really, have been quite cross about it and think it's something I shouldn't do, and told me that it's not very nice and so on. One person said if he was going to give me one more chance, he wouldn't unsubscribe immediately, but if I do it once more, he's going to unsubscribe. I don't want to lose any subscribers. What I would say to him or anybody else who really doesn't like me reading out some comments is, stop watching now. I mean, it's you don't have to watch them. But I did get a few gems of wisdom from last week's video, and I'd like to read some of them to you. I won't read too many, but just a few. Someone called Lenny Lahr said, I've observed politics for the past 50 years. I've never known such a hate campaign against a PM as with Boris. It is nasty, hateful bullying, and it is evil and relentless. He was stitched up by civil servants who deliberately got drunk and partied. They received a staggering 146 fines, and yet this has been shockingly ignored by the media. They are totally and entirely to blame, not Boris. What's he talking about? It's been all over the media. Anthony Shortland, he doesn't seem to like my videos. He's like, I fell asleep. Simon Pyman, too busy with the tit for tat and not seeing the big picture and who is behind it. Get to the point or stop putting out these silly videos. Incidentally, one or two people have commented and said, look, don't be upset about these people writing this stuff, unpleasant stuff about you, and so I'm being rude to you. I promise you, I couldn't care less. I find it very amusing, and I hope other people find it amusing as well. I mean, these people are just so silly. I mean, they're just not to be taken seriously. This is a slightly long one. It's somebody called Anon Nemo. I think he might have commented before. But anyway, what he says is, what sanctimonious nonsense we heard in this video. All politicians are egotistical and tell lies. I couldn't bring myself to listen to the entire video and waste half an hour of my life. And then he goes on to tell me what's in the video. He couldn't be bothered to watch it. He couldn't got time. We're going to waste half an hour. And he says, I expect there to have been some mention of the booing of Johnson and his wife. Most likely the boos did not come from ordinary people celebrating the Jubilee, but from political activists. Didn't really see any of them there. He then says, due to the nature of the pandemic, PPE had to be acquired in a hurry. And of course mistakes were made in this regard, so he forgives all that. Did you see today? They were saying the NHS spent 12.7 billion on PPE, all bought in a rush. And 8.7 billion, and that's nearly 75% of it, is being written off. And they were talking on the wireless this morning about the fact that they're burning it. They're burning, I think it's something like £4 billion worth of burning, of PPE to burn. And you think this is staggering when you think of the poverty and the cost of living and all the problems we've got. They're burning PPE which has been bought and paid for. I mean, what's next? Are they going to be ordering PPE from because what they said, what they said was, sort of started kind of saying it wasn't quite so bad as it seemed. They're going to use the heat when they burn this to create electricity. So it will waste. It's going to power stations to be burnt to create electricity. I mean, you might as well, are they going to buy more PPE to burn to create electricity, generate electricity? Regarding the parties, Johnson was not very much involved in all these breaches. That is a lie. The main thing this clown accuses Johnson of. This is just another long-winded loser who cannot accept Brexit or forgive Johnson for bringing it about. I can't forget Brexit and I can't forget Johnson for bringing it about, and I intend to go on making that known to all and sundry. Andre Needham. I had high hopes for Boris at the last election and thought that he might be a proper Tory and deliver what I think the majority of people in this country want. Yes, what we all want, something much more right-wing than we've got at the moment. Sadly, Boris and most of his colleagues seem to be liberals and hell-bent on destroying this country. I'm tired of him now, and he should go. As for a replacement, the only real Tory that I can think of as a replacement is Jacob Rees-Mogg. Can you believe that? Can you imagine that? This is somebody called Henry Tudor. Whatever Boris does, it would be 10 times worse with Labour in charge. Watch this country go to the dogs if people are stupid enough to vote for them. Now we get some really deep stuff. Labour are the party that changed the skyline of the country. I hadn't noticed that. What skyline? They bended the knee to domestic terrorists. They bankrupt a nation, made being English and proud of their country a racist crime. They invented the politically correct brigade and wokeness. And finally, if that wasn't enough, they blocked every step of Brexit, forcing a general election, and denied the nation a democratic vote on the EU. Not sure why he bothers, really. Stand right. Hang on in there, Boris. Great job so far. Jim Boken. So Boris isn't left enough, according to an overtly elitist Michael. Overtly elitist? What does that mean? Whilst for any centre-right person, Boris made Brexit finally happen, albeit badly, but he's otherwise just a disastrous left-wing globalist PM like Cameron or May. So you've got some real right-wingers in today. Milo Reg, I just couldn't believe it. I went to the pub the other day and the pub ball was in. I left. I think he's suggesting I'm very boring. Okay, just two quick ones and then I'll finish. You blokes out there, have any of you the good sense to ask your fascist spokesman, so I was being lefty, the last page, there's no fascist spokesman, what his alternative is? I personally think that he is a bloody establishment ponce trying to stir the Gago. G-A-G-O-O, I have no idea what that is. I'm supposed to be trying to stir. And finally, Colin Wishbone says, what an ego. The times you've posted numerous snide, obnoxious comments about Johnson to a point where you'll be believing them yourself. Get real. It's clear why you do it. It is not because it is fair criticism. Johnson's cock-ups, or similar, is to inflate not only your bank balance, but so when you look in the mirror, how good you look. I mean, you can hardly complain about me reading out that sort of stuff. I mean, as I say, you don't have to watch it, but this is extraordinary that people do actually bother to write that sort of stuff. But anyway, if you watch this far, thank you very much, and I much appreciate it. And until next time, bye for now.